For today's video, I'm going to give you the quick and dirty breakdown of my Halo Reach Mythic Overhaul mod. Now, the mod is far from complete, but I want to give you an idea of the stuff that I'm working on. But before we get into the mod, I want to take a moment to thank my Patreon members. Weaver900, Adon Green, Lina Schultz, Keith Byrne, Punk Anderson, AdamJohnsons, Crunchyhuntsman, INGSOC, Deep Retreat, Magnir Productions, and Noble of Death 16. You guys are amazing and I appreciate your support so much. Alright, so let's get into the mod. So first things first, if you didn't know, Halo scales damage based on difficulty, so an enemy will do more damage to you on Legendary than they would on Easy. I believe that enemy difficulty should come from how the AI moves, shoots, and rank distribution. So I didn't entirely get rid of the damage increase, but I dropped the values quite a bit. Now you'll have less frustrating one-shot moments in Legendary difficulty. On the topic of damage, have you ever noticed that allies in Reach do next to no damage to enemies? This is because they had a ridiculous nerf in Reach to their damage, so I've made them do equal damage as the player. To keep them from being overpowered and just mowing down all the enemies before you can get into the fight, I haven't touched their firing patterns, so you would still have to jump in and save your marines. Something else I wanted to do with this mod is add new datapad terminals that you can discover. Now, I'm not a writer at all, so don't expect some giant cohesive story that I'm telling with these, but you can expect some fun little details that you can hunt down. For example, maybe you'll find a data log about a mysterious Australian Marine fighting his way off of Reach. Alright, so did you know that Reach had a cut squirrel? This little guy is the perfect rival to the Halo 3 rat, so I figured I would include him on some levels. This was recently made available to us thanks to the mod tools, and all I really had to do was change the damage section and material of the squirrel. So on top of the squirrel and the rat, I had to add something a little goofy to the mix. For the icy environments, I've added a penguin that shuffles around very awkwardly. Now let's move on to something that'll please all the gore fiends and M-rated content enjoyers. Like my Halo 3 mod, I've increased the blood particle and decal size. On top of this, I've also brought back the headshot gore effect and sound to give you some nice visual and sound feedback upon landing a headshot. Okay, so my mods are pretty known for cramming as many weapons into the sandbox as possible, and maybe they aren't the most balanced because I choose variety and fun over a strict and limited sandbox. What I've done to break up the sandbox a little while also adding multiple roles of weapons was introduce new damage types and define existing damage types. So you've got your basics like kinetic bullet damage, which is good against health. Then you have your plasma, which is good at draining shields. As for new damage types that I've added to Reach, there's Radiation, Armor Piercing, Explosive, and Hard Light. Radiation will apply a lingering damage over time effect that'll constantly take damage. Armor Piercing will let you shoot through the flesh of enemies. Explosive will let you deal bonus damage to vehicles and weak points. And lastly, Hard Light will shred shields and health, so watch out for it. Alright, so in my Halo 3 mod, I introduced ammo packs that you could find scattered around levels, and while that remains true for the UNSC packs in my Reach mod, Covenant packs will now have a chance to drop from all enemies. Both factions also have a light and heavy variant of these ammo packs, and light will refill your more standard weapons, while heavy will refill your power weapons. Now, on to the most controversial topic in Reach, Bloom. For my mod, I didn't get rid of Bloom because contrary to popular belief, Halo has always had Bloom, it just wasn't visually displayed on your reticle. So what I did was slightly nerf it across the whole sandbox, and then as a little twist, if you crouch you'll get 0 Bloom, kinda like you're playing CSGO or Valorant. While we're on the topic of changes in the HUD, you might have noticed that I've changed quite a bit. I have a new shield and health bar that is infinite inspired, and I have a few micro details that give the HUD some style. Now for the next change on the list. With night vision, I've done something a little different, and I've kinda made it behave more like visor mode from ODST. So you'll activate night vision, and it will highlight characters, weapons, and vehicles in red. Movement-wise with the player, I've bumped all speed values slightly, but not as much as the speed values in my Halo 3 mod. I've also slightly bumped up player jump height so that you can crouch jump onto more ledges, but it's not as extreme as Halo 3. Alright, so let's get into Firefight changes. First things first, placed around the map are all the new weapons and equipment that I've added to the mod. You'll be able to search for a particular weapon, armor ability, or ammo pack, and it'll respawn with every round that you complete. The enemy waves will also have new weapons and ranks added to them. The drop pod waves have also had slight changes in enemy and weapon variety. With every map, you'll also have some marine allies that'll spawn in and fight alongside you. Lastly, every map has its own starting loadout. The final part of my Reach Overhaul mod releasing at a later date will be the multiplayer. Coming with the multiplayer overhaul will be a full Forge overhaul adding tons of new objects and all the additions of my mod. Now let's talk a little bit about Sandbox changes. I know how the community can get about rebalance type mods, but I've tried to make it a little more interesting with the damage types and small tweaks to literally everything in the sandbox. So for weapons, you have all kinds of changes from adding scopes to automatics, projectile changes, ammo and plasma heat changes, and like previously stated, damage types for all sorts of weapons. Armor abilities have also seen a wide range of changes from being able to use some in the air, energy consumption changes, and different uses altogether. Lastly, vehicles have globally seen a change in speed, gravity, turn rates, and now display the vehicle hull value in the HUD. I could break down every item of the sandbox, but we would be here all day, so when the mod comes out, I'll have a full list of changes on the mod page. I have an insane amount of new weapons in the mod, and honestly, I'm not going to go through every single one. So I'm going to put up a list on the screen that you can pause and read through. What I will talk about are the throwable fusion coils and plasma batteries because they're really cool to have in Reach. This was accomplished by making the fusion coil a weapon tag and then using the crate projectile block to throw out a fusion coil. This has gotta be one of the best things that Infinite has introduced to the series, and it's very satisfying to have in Reach. Alright, let's talk about some new armor abilities. First up is the speed boost, and it does exactly what you would think and is pretty much a better version of sprint. Next we have the health regen, which as you would expect regens your health. Then we have the enhanced radar, which can kinda seem useless at first, but it extends the range of your radar, keeps enemies constantly highlighted on it, and gives you a visual red pulse briefly on players, vehicles, and weapons. Alright, this one's a little more interesting. The Hex Shield Wall will drop a Hex Shield that you can play around as cover. This is the Shield Overcharge armor ability, and it does two things. When your shields are fully charged, it'll overcharge your shields and give you an overshield, and while the ability is active, you take reduced damage. Next up is the Melee Berserk ability, and when this is active, you do increased melee damage, and you can even knock things back further. Finally, we have the Ground Pound ability, which is heavily inspired by the Halo Online ability, and as you would expect, it deals AoE damage, knocking everything around. Okay, so on to some character changes. Almost every character has had new ranks, new behaviors, added effects, and tons of AI tweaks. One example of an AI combat tweak is that Elites and Brutes will now use various armor abilities to mix up the flow of combat. I have two new Hunter ranks introduced into the mod, the first being the Major using a Halo 3 inspired particle cannon, and the Pulse Hunter carrying a pulse cannon. Now, I didn't just recolor enemies and give them new weapons in the mod, I've also introduced some classics. I've brought back the Sentinels for Firefight and Campaign. And on the Installation 04 map, you can find a Firefight exclusive Guilty Spark boss fight, heavily inspired by the boss fight at the end of Halo 3. On top of all that, I've also brought back the English voice lines for Grunts, Elites, and Brutes.
Went directly to the courthouse. Oh, just trying to be efficient. I didn't realize I had such good aim. They're more fragile than I suspected. Cover me, I'm...
For the troopers, you have new color schemes matching the environments they're in. Speaking of color scheme changes, I've slightly tweaked how Noble Team looks in the campaign. Also, with Noble Team, you'll be able to trade weapons with them throughout the campaign.
So that's our new number 6.
There's probably so much I left out of the video, but I think I'm gonna wrap it up here. I want to thank Skaboodly Doodle for making the awesome M73 LMG tag. I want to thank all of these people for all the models used in this mod. And finally, I want to thank the VKMT crew for porting over the BR, SMG, and Magnum animations used in this mod. That's all I wanted to show off today, and I hope you enjoyed watching. See ya.